Hey everyone. Tonight we're stepping into a landscape where steel and soil became tragically inseparable, where the black earth of Russia split open under mines and shells, and burning tank crews clawed at their hatches, lungs filling with smoke. You won't hear heroic bugles or banners snapping in the wind here, only the shriek of Katyushas tearing the dawn apart, the howl of Stukas falling like vultures, and the low moan of men trapped beneath the weight of their own machines. This isn't about clean arrows on maps or generals pointing at charts. This is about the largest clash of armor in human history, where villages were ground to dust, where fields turned into graveyards of iron, and where both empires learned that victory would taste like ash. If you want unflinching tales of humanity reduced to rust and rubble, then like and subscribe in the comments. Tell me, where are you watching from, and what image of war's futility still lingers in your mind. I'll steel yourself. The air is already thick with smoke. Follow me into Kursk, the day the steppe itself became a grave. You are there, in the deep, earthen embrace of a dugout on the Kursk steppe, on the eve of July 4th, 1943. Damp earth walls press close around you, a temporary shelter from the vast, open world outside. The air hangs heavy, thick with raw soil and the faint, unsettling tang of fuel and gunpowder. A prelude to the storm everyone knows is coming. The only sound breaking the profound silence is the slow, deliberate drip of water from the dugout ceiling. Each drop a relentless tick-tock counting down to an unknown hour. You feel the cool, rough earth against your back, small comfort against mounting apprehension. Around you, young faces are illuminated by a weak, flickering lantern. Shadows dance on their worn expressions, tracing lines of fear and weariness. A whisper, thin and fragile, comes from a 19-year-old soldier beside you, his voice barely audible above your own heartbeat. Tomorrow, he murmurs, gaze fixed on nothing. Will I burn inside a tank, or be crushed under a tiger's tracks? The words hang, a question without an answer, a shared dread no one dares acknowledge aloud. You feel the weight of his fear, a cold, heavy stone in your chest. No comfort to offer, only a shared silence that speaks volumes. Across the unseen lines, in a mirroring landscape, you imagine other young men, German soldiers, perhaps, lighting last cigarettes, small flares briefly illuminating their hands as they shuffle cards, conjuring an illusion of normalcy. Their faces, too, etched with tension, pretending not to hear the rhythmic clang of tank tracks being oiled outside their shelters. Methodical preparations for a dawn that promises only fire. The subtle metallic scent of lubricant, carried on the faintest whisper of wind, might even reach you, a phantom signal across no man's land. On the surface, above these buried fears, the last tasks are completed. You picture Soviet civilians, mostly women, their calloused hands trembling, carefully burying the final anti-tank mines. Their fingers, etched with the toil of the land, meticulously cover detonators with soil, a silent prayer perhaps accompanying each movement. The vulnerability of their act, the sheer will to defend their earth, feels palpable even from your subterranean hideout. Later, a captured German agent's smirk cuts through the tension, a chilling premonition. Tomorrow, he asserts with strange certainty, his voice a low, gravelly sound. This earth will glow red. His words echo in the stillness, painting a vivid, terrifying image. You press closer to the earth, as if seeking to absorb its strength, yet feel only its cold, indifferent presence. No one truly sleeps tonight, even the wind, when it occasionally sighs over the steppe, carries that unforgettable, unsettling taste of fuel and gunpowder, a constant, gentle reminder of the inferno that waits. The hours stretch, slow and deliberate, until the sky itself, just before sunrise, seems to tear open like a gate to a place you cannot yet comprehend. Suddenly, the pre-dawn quiet shatters. The world erupts at 2 a.m. on July 5th. Not a singular explosion, but a cataclysmic chorus. Thousands of Soviet guns roaring as one. A symphony of destruction ripping through the night. You're jolted violently, thrown against the dugout wall as the ground bucks and shudders. Shockwaves slam into the shelter, a physical blow leaving your ears ringing, a metallic taste of blood in your mouth. Faces around you contort in pain. Some men bleed from noses and ears, bodies overwhelmed by sheer, concussive force. The air itself compresses, stealing your breath, leaving you gasping in the sudden, deafening chaos. Beyond your shelter, you can only imagine the horror. Tigers, gleaming and formidable hours ago, fresh from factory lines, are instantly buried in fiery plumes of earth and shrapnel. The ground churns, swallowing steel behemoths whole, only to spit out wreckage and broken men. Survivors crawl out, faces blackened with blood and dust, eyes wide with terror that transcends language. You hear the phantom echo of a German soldier's later recall, a voice filled with raw disbelief. We thought they were about to attack, but it was only a welcome to hell, a welcome delivered with the force of an unchained monster. Then, as if to answer the earth's primal scream, the Wehrmacht's own artillery unleashes its fury. Thousands of barrels ignite in a retaliatory roar, a deafening counterpoint tearing the atmosphere apart. The ground trembles again, a deeper, more resonant vibration, as if the planet itself groans in agony. Forests on the horizon vanish in sudden, blinding flashes, replaced by splintered trunks and towering clouds of smoke. Trenches, moments ago filled with men, are flattened and buried, becoming instant graves where men are swallowed by the very earth they sought to defend. Above you, a more chilling sound begins, the high-pitched shriek of katyushas. Like banshees tearing across the sky, you hear their distinctive, terrifying howl, a sound promising utter devastation as they trail fire like angry comets. Villages, distant specks, vanish in monstrous explosions, consumed by fire and dust. The air is thick with the acrid scent of propellant and burning wood, a suffocating blanket pressing down on everything. You instinctively look upwards, seeking the familiar comfort of the sky, but find none. A Soviet officer's later words form in your mind, a haunting description. We did not see the sun that morning, only the sky bleeding. Dawn doesn't arrive with gentle light, but with a crimson haze, a grim, fiery spectacle born of man's destructive power. You feel profound disorientation, a loss of natural order, as if the world itself has been turned inside out. The cacophony continues, a relentless assault on every sense, until, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the intensity subsides, and when the smoke, heavy and choking, finally begins to lift its veil, the ground trembles once more, this time with a new, deeper sound, the growl of endless steel tracks, rolling inexorably forward. As the echoes of the barrage slowly fade, a new, profound tremor ripples through the earth beneath you. It's a low, guttural growl, vibrating up through your boots and into your bones. You feel it before you see it. An immense, grinding sound, signaling an unyielding advance. Then, from the horizon, they emerge panzers, panthers, and the fearsome tigers, hulking steel predators rolling forward in an endless, terrifying tide. They raise vast clouds of black dust, a swirling, choking curtain swallowing the distant horizon, transforming the familiar steppe into a landscape of menacing shadows and churning earth. You watch, breath catching in your throat, as these iron beasts churn through the dry, black earth. Each rumbling engine sounds like a prehistoric beast awakening, metallic treads biting deep into the soil. The air quickly fills with the acrid smell of exhaust fumes and the metallic tang of hot iron. Then, without warning, the ground beneath their tracks erupts. Hidden mines, patiently laid, unleash their fury. You see a steel behemoth flung skyward like a toy, twisting in a slow, agonizing ballet of destruction. The explosion throws its crew out like rag dolls, their forms indistinct against the fiery blast. The shock rattles you to your core. A chilling memory from a German sergeant surfaces. The tank ahead of me became a fireball, and I heard screams, trapped inside the smoke. You understand that horror now? Life consumed in an instant, suffering stifled by roaring flames. It's not merely machines clashing. It's men, encased in steel, meeting their end. From the trenches, where you might be holding your breath, Soviet soldiers burst forth. They rise like specters from the churned earth, clutching anti-tank rifles, grim and determined. Their target the flanks of mighty tigers, the vulnerable points in their armor. You witness their desperate courage, flashes of rifle fire, futile attempts to halt the rolling tide. Many are crushed beneath relentless tracks, their lives extinguished before they can even reload, swallowed by the churned earth and dust. A young Red Army recruit's words echo softly. The ground itself throbbed like the heartbeat of a giant beast. I thought the earth was screaming. You feel that scream, deep within your own chest, a vibration of fear and awe. The dry while black soil, whipped into a frenzy by tank treads and explosions, blinds you with dust, a gritty film coating your tongue, stinging your eyes. But this landscape is fickle. A sudden, torrential rain begins to fall, transforming fields within moments. Dust turns to thick, clinging mud. Fields become treacherous bogs. You watch as heavy armor, previously unstoppable, now founders, tracks sinking deeper into the mire. Even mighty tigers, once symbols of invincible power, stand stranded like iron gravestones, helpless and abandoned, their menacing growls reduced to impotent silence. The battlefield, once a stage for steel, reclaims its own, turning the tools of war into monuments of futility. If the open fields were a hell of steel and mud, then the village of Poniri, just ahead, would become a second Stalingrad, a crucible of urban terror. The journey continues, and soon you're enveloped by the brutal confines of Poniri, a seemingly unremarkable village transformed into a labyrinth of death. The air is no longer just thick with dust and exhaust, but with the acrid, metallic tang of burning masonry and human sweat. Every house, every cellar, every building, no matter how humble, has been meticulously turned into a fortress. You see boarded-up windows, loopholes carved into walls, and the chilling glint of grenades piled high in cellars. waiting to be unleashed. The quiet of the steppe is replaced by the incessant crackle of rifle fire, the sharp reports of explosions, and the distant, guttural shouts of men. You're drawn into the fight, a grim witness to close-quarters brutality. Soviet defenders, entrenched in schoolhouses, warehouses filled with ghosts of mundane goods, and even the hallowed churchyard, fight with desperate, unyielding ferocity. You can almost feel the vibrations of grenades raining down from upper floors, their detonations echoing like thunderclaps in confined spaces. Men, engulfed in flames, leap from burning windows, a horrifying spectacle against the smoke-filled sky, only to land and immediately find new firing positions. Their will to resist transcending even agony. The human spirit, in this crucible, proves both terrifyingly fragile and incredibly resilient. The stench permeates everything, the sickening, sweet smell of burning flesh, mingling with soot and pulverized concrete. Flamethrowers, spitting liquid fire, scour basements, turning hidden bunkers into infernos. You hear muffled screams from below, sounds that sicken even hardened German soldiers, echoing a horror transcending allegiance. The fire's heat radiates outwards, an oppressive blanket adding to the suffocating atmosphere. A German officer's recollection whispers into your mind. A Russian ran out of a blazing house, his body on fire, still firing until he collapsed. You witness this raw, unyielding courage, a testament to a spirit that refuses to break, even when utterly consumed. The image imprints itself upon your consciousness, a ghost of defiance against overwhelming odds. As night falls, Poniri is no longer a village. It's a landscape of utter desolation. Every building reduced to rubble, soaked in the blood of those who fought and died within its walls. Fires still flicker among the ruins, casting macabre shadows that dance across the destruction. The Germans, in their grim assessment, give it a name that perfectly encapsulates its horror, a small Armageddon. You stand amidst the wreckage, feeling the gritty texture of pulverized stone beneath your feet, breathing the smoke-laden air, sensing the profound silence that now reigns, broken only by crackling embers and distant moans of the wounded. And while the north, here in Poniri, drowns in fire and pulverized bricks, the south, prepares for an even greater storm, a tempest of steel and sky, unleashed on an unimaginable scale. As the echoes of Poniri's destruction fade, your awareness shifts to the southern front, where the conflict takes on a new, terrifying dimension. Above you, the sky, once a symbol of endless freedom, becomes a canvas of terror. You feel the ground vibrate, not with the rumble of tanks or shock of artillery, but with a deeper, more pervasive tremor. An earthquake seizing the land. Thousands of Luftwaffe sorties descend from the heavens, their engines a drone of impending doom growing louder until it fills every corner of the sky. Then, the bombs begin to fall. You hear the whistling descent, a sound gripping your stomach with icy fear, followed by earth-shattering explosions ripping through the landscape. You instinctively press face down into the soil, feeling concussive force through every inch of your body, tasting gritty dust rising with each blast. You hear muffled prayers, whispered pleas mingling with engine roars and thunder of detonations. It's a moment of pure helplessness, where the vastness of the sky becomes a source of overwhelming, indiscriminate destruction. Yet, amidst this aerial onslaught, the earth below offers its own defiant scream. Katyushas, those dreaded rocket launchers, roar back with their signature banshee-like shriek, sending fiery trails streaking into the sky, a desperate and furious reply to the nightmare above. You watch their arcs of fire, a fleeting symbol of resistance against the relentless aerial assault. The devastation wrought by these air raids is unprecedented. Entire Soviet tank brigades, once formidable, are erased from the earth in mere moments by precise, devastating airstrikes. This is the first time in history, you realize, that whole armored formations vanish, not in ground combat, but from the sky alone, a terrifying testament to war's evolving nature. A survivor's voice echoes in your mind, a hollow whisper. When I crawled up, only 2 of us were left from the battalion. The sheer, unfathomable scale of loss settles in, a heavy blanket of despair. The air around you becomes a thick, suffocating mixture of smoke, dust, flame, and countless corpses. So dense, so heavy with particulate matter. You find yourself choking, the air feeling thicker than tank exhaust fumes, more stifling than an armored vehicle's confined space. The taste of ash and burnt metal is constant, clinging to your tongue and nostrils. You squint through the haze, trying to discern shapes, to grasp the reality of the devastation. But everything is blurred by omnipresent gray. The world is reduced to a chaotic tapestry of destruction, a relentless assault on the senses. And you know, with chilling certainty, that this overwhelming aerial assault is merely the overture, the grim opening act to what would become the greatest clash of armor the world had ever seen. Prokhorovka, where steel would truly grind steel. The air, still thick with the lingering stench of smoke and burnt earth from the aerial bombardment, now pulses with a different kind of energy, a growing hum promising an even more direct, brutal confrontation. It is dawn on July 12th, and you are positioned on the vast, undulating steppe near Prokhorovka, a place forever seared into the annals of human conflict. As the first rays of light struggle to pierce the smoky haze, you witness an astonishing spectacle: 500 Soviet T-34 tanks. A rolling wave of green steel surge forward. They move with almost impossible speed, a relentless torrent aimed directly at the heart of 300 formidable SS Panzers. You hear the desperate, audacious order from General Rotmistrov, reverberating through the air, even if only in your mind. Full speed ahead, fire at point blank. It's a command demanding total commitment, a charge into the very jaws of destruction. The engines of hundreds of tanks roar, a deafening symphony overwhelming all other sounds. The ground trembles violently under the collective weight and speed. A living, breathing tremor racing towards you. Within moments, the entire landscape is swallowed by a churning, black dust cloud, so immense and dense it obliterates the daylight. You are plunged into a swirling, chaotic void, unable to see more than a few feet in front of you. Yet, through the choking dust, you hear the terrifying, unique sound of steel ramming steel. Tanks collide head-on, colossal masses meeting with catastrophic force. You hear the wrenching shriek of metal tearing apart, the dull thud of armor crumpling. Some machines crushed into the very earth, their powerful frames collapsing like paper. It's a battle reduced to its most primal form, a gladiatorial arena of iron giants. An SS trooper's grim recollection surfaces. They swarmed us like bees. I heard their screams even inside my hatch. You imagine the claustrophobia of being trapped within those steel cocoons, the terrifying vibrations, the desperate struggle to survive. You witness Soviet crews, their tanks engulfed in flames, leap from burning hatches, their figures silhouetted against the inferno. But their escape is often tragically brief. Many are immediately crushed by German tank tracks, their desperate dash for life ending abruptly beneath relentless, unforgiving steel. The battle rages for hours, a maelstrom of explosions, fire, and the grinding cacophony of metal. Then, as abruptly as it began, the ferocity starts to wane. Slowly, agonizingly, the dust begins to clear, revealing the horrifying aftermath. The steppe, once a vibrant expanse of green and black earth, is now a cemetery of twisted steel. Hundreds upon hundreds of tanks lie scattered across the landscape, their hulks smoldering and broken, like the discarded toys of monstrous children. Fuel tanks, weakened by the battle, pop with chilling regularity, each explosion a small, final punctuation mark to the immense destruction. The air is thick with the scent of burnt oil, cordite, and the grim, unmistakable odor of death. You stand amidst this silent testament to human futility, understanding that Prokhorovka crowns no victor, only a plain littered with smoking hulks, a monumental cost paid in blood and iron. As the immense dust cloud from Prokhorovka begins its slow, mournful drift away, you are left to survey the grim cost, not just in twisted metal, but in human lives. The immediate fury has subsided, leaving an eerie quiet, a profound stillness heavier than any battle noise. In a mere few hours, the Red Army lost over 300 tanks, a staggering number representing countless lives. You picture the crews, incinerated inside their machines, trapped in metal tombs, their last moments consumed by fire. The silence now seems to amplify the horror of their fate. A Soviet officer's admission echoes softly in your mind, a voice heavy with loss. "We lost a whole generation in one morning." The words paint a devastating picture. Not just military casualties, but a future extinguished. Youth sacrificed on an industrial scale. You feel profound exhaustion settling upon the landscape, a weariness permeating the very air. It wasn't only the Soviet side that bled so profoundly. German panthers, once sleek and formidable, lay broken and inert, their advanced mechanisms failing under immense strain. Mighty tigers, renowned for their power, stall and cease to move, sophisticated engines seizing, tracks finally silenced. These machines, symbols of a nation's technological prowess, crumbled as quickly and irrevocably as the men who operated them. The illusion of invincibility, for both man and machine, has been shattered here. You glimpse soldiers, faces streaked with soot and grime, bodies aching from relentless combat, seeking solace and cleansing in nearby rivers. But even here, there's no escape from the battle's grim legacy. The rivers, once clear and flowing, now run red, stained with the blood of thousands. As they wash away the grime of battle, you hear them muttering, voices hoarse and hollow, a phrase speaking of despair and dawning defeat. We will never see Berlin again. It's not just a statement of a lost objective, but a profound loss of hope. Prokhorovka, in its terrible aftermath, crowns no true victor, no shouts of triumph, no celebratory cheers, only a vast, desolate plain, littered with smoking, broken hulks of what were once powerful war machines. The air is thick with burnt oil, gunpowder, and the heavy, metallic smell of fresh blood. You stand amidst this scene of utter devastation, the weight of the losses pressing down. It's a moment of somber reflection, a realization that even in victory's pursuit, there's an unbearable price to be paid, a debt incurred that can never truly be repaid. The steppe, now a colossal graveyard of iron and flesh, serves as a silent, stark monument to the futility and horror of such an unparalleled clash. Just as the immense cost of Prokhorovka settles like a shroud over the southern front, you feel a new, powerful tremor emanating from the north, a seismic shift signaling a profound change in the tide of battle. On July 12th, the same day Prokhorovka reached its bloody climax, 1,000 Soviet guns roar to life near Orel. This barrage isn't merely a repetition of earlier bombardments. It's a sustained, overwhelming crescendo, shaking the very sky and soil. A force so immense it feels as though the world itself is being torn asunder. The ground beneath you bucks and shudders with relentless intensity, each concussive blast echoing the death knell of German hopes. A German soldier's desperate words from that day whisper into your consciousness. It felt like the end of the world. You can understand that sentiment, the sense of an unstoppable force unleashed. A relentless hammer blow against an already weary and depleted foe. The air is thick with continuous explosions, a deafening roar obliterating all other thought. Under this crushing assault, the Wehrmacht lines, already stretched and battered, begin to splinter. You witness, through dust and smoke, the grim spectacle of retreat. What was once an orderly defense now becomes a desperate scramble, units falling back through heaps of burning comrades. The smell of burning flesh, mingling with the acrid scent of propellant, becomes a constant, sickening presence. You see survivors, faces gaunt with exhaustion and fear, stumble past bodies charred black, indistinguishable in their agony. It's a horror that transcends humanity, where the line between man and machine blurs in the crucible of fire. The sight is a stark reminder of war's impersonal brutality, reducing individuals to mere shadows. General Walter Model, known for his stubborn defense, clings desperately to orders of hold the line. But even he, deep down, knows the truth. The ambitious offensive codenamed Operation Citadel is dead. The dream of encircling the Kursk salient, of dealing a decisive blow to the Red Army, has dissolved into smoke and ashes. You feel the collective sigh of despair, the dawning realization of irreversible defeat permeating the German ranks. The Northern Hammer, relentless and unforgiving, continues its work, pushing back, reclaiming ground, driving home the stark reality that the initiative has irrevocably shifted. The once formidable German offensive, born of meticulous planning and great ambition, has now been blunted, broken, and thrown into a desperate, bloody retreat. As the Northern Hammer continues its relentless assault, you turn your gaze southward, where German forces, already reeling, begin to fracture and break under renewed Soviet pressure. This new offensive, Operation Rumyantsev, is a sweeping, inexorable push, seeking to exploit weakening German lines and reclaim vital territory. You feel the ground vibrate with the Red Army's forward momentum, a sustained advance contrasting sharply with earlier desperate defenses. On August 5th, you witness the symbolic fall of Belgorod, a significant victory sending ripples of hope and determination through the Soviet Union. In Moscow, the news is met with jubilant celebration. 124 cannon salutes boom across the capital, a thunderous announcement of success reverberating far beyond city limits. You can almost hear the cheers, the joyous exclamations. a stark contrast to the grim silence that has so often dominated the battlefield. Then, on August 23rd, the pivotal city of Kharkov falls for the last time. It's a moment of immense historical significance. Kharkov, a city that had changed hands multiple times throughout the war, is now forever lost to Germany. You see disheveled and demoralized Wehrmacht units fleeing through burning streets, their retreat chaotic and desperate. The air is thick with the acrid smell of burning buildings and the heavy scent of defeat. As they pass, they're met not with pity, but with bitter curses from local civilians, who have endured years of occupation and unimaginable suffering. The animosity is palpable, a visceral rejection of their former occupiers. A German officer's somber confession resonates in your thoughts, a poignant reflection on their scale of loss. We lost more than a city, we lost our future. His words speak not just of strategic defeat, but of a profound psychological blow. The realization that the tide has turned irrevocably against them. The dream of a German-dominated East begins to crumble, replaced by the grim reality of a relentless Soviet advance. Amidst the smoldering ruins of Kharkov, a new dawn breaks. You witness Soviet flags, vibrant against the backdrop of destruction, slowly rising over the liberated city. Each flag hoisted is a symbol of triumph, a testament to immense sacrifice and unwavering resolve. Yet, even in this moment of victory, the cost is clear. You see many of the soldiers who plant these flags, faces etched with exhaustion, bodies trembling, collapse from sheer fatigue once their task is done. The euphoria of liberation is tempered by the immense, crushing weight of what they have endured. The battle for Kursk and its cascading consequences has undeniably opened a new chapter. For from this hard-won ground, the road to Berlin now lies, irrevocably, open before the Red Army. As the smoke finally clears, and the last echoes of the vast, grinding conflict at Kursk fade into quiet, a profound stillness settles upon the scarred earth. You stand amidst the wreckage, a silent observer of a landscape forever changed. You look back at the vast fields, once green and vibrant, now churned and pockmarked, a colossal graveyard of iron and flesh. The air still carries the faint, lingering scent of burnt oil, metallic dust, and something heavier, more somber, the enduring presence of what transpired here. The numbers, though softened through the lens of memory and reflection, are staggering. The Red Army, in this colossal struggle, bled over 1 million men and lost approximately 7,000 tanks. On the German side, the cost was around 200,000 men and 200 tanks. These are not merely statistics. They represent countless individual stories, lives extinguished, futures unwritten. You feel the immense, crushing weight of these losses, a profound sorrow for the human cost. Yet, as you contemplate these numbers, a crucial distinction emerges. Only one side, you realize, possessed the vast human and industrial capacity to replace what was lost. The Soviet Union, despite immense sacrifices, could endure, rebuild, and continue the fight. For Germany, however, Kursk was a wound from which it would never truly recover. The Wehrmacht, once the spearhead of seemingly unstoppable offensives, would never again launch a major strategic offensive in the East. The initiative, seized with such brutal force by the Red Army, would never be relinquished. A German soldier's later confession, whispered from the depths of despair, encapsulates the profound shift. At Kursk, we lost our belief in victory. These words, simple yet devastating, speak volumes about the psychological impact of the battle. It was not just a military defeat, it was a spiritual one, a shattering of morale and confidence that reverberated through every rank. The dream of a triumphant Eastern campaign, of a vast German empire stretching across the plains, evaporated in the smoke and fire of Kursk. From Kursk onward, the Red Army, hardened by unimaginable trials, driven by unwavering resolve and a clear path ahead, would drive relentlessly westward. Their footsteps, once defensive, were now aimed squarely at Berlin, a march that would continue for 2 more arduous years. Kursk was not merely a battle, not just a turning point in the fortunes of war. It was, in its stark and brutal reality, the death of Germany's last hope for victory in the East. A moment when the scales of fate irrevocably tipped, setting in motion the final, grinding end of a devastating global conflict. The quiet now is filled with the echoes of that truth. A gentle, somber understanding that resonates through the vast, black earth. Imagine, if you will, the crisp morning air of an Eastern European summer, tainted not by the usual dewdrops and blossoming fields, but by the distant rumble of an approaching storm. It is June of 1941, and the German Wehrmacht, a force that had swept across Europe with what seemed like an unstoppable might, now found itself deep within the vast, enigmatic lands of the Soviet Union. My mind often drifts to the scene that unfolded on those sprawling plains, a scene that would forever alter the course of history and the very concept of armored warfare. I picture a German anti-tank crew, perhaps a handful of young men, hardened by previous campaigns, yet still clinging to a certain confidence in their weaponry. They are manning their trusted Pak-36, a 37mm anti-tank gun, affectionately, or perhaps ironically nicknamed Door Knocker because of its distinctive thud against enemy armor. They scan the horizon, their hearts perhaps beating a steady rhythm of routine, until a shadow emerges from the tree line, growing steadily larger, taking on a form unlike anything they have ever been trained to face. The original intelligence reports had spoken of Soviet tanks, mostly the smaller, older models they had already encountered and easily dispatched. But this was different. This was a hulking shape, with an aggressive, low-slung profile. Its armor, even from a distance, seemed to defy the conventions of tank design, sloped at an acute angle, giving it an almost alien appearance. As it drew closer, the men would aim, their hands steady, their eyes narrowed in practiced concentration. A command would be barked, the breech loaded, and then the deafening roar as a shell, about the size of a large soda can, hurtled towards the approaching behemoth. I can almost hear the sharp, metallic clang, a sound that would usually signify penetration, a fatal blow. But then, to their utter, chilling disbelief, they would witness the impossible. Instead of biting deep into the steel, the shell would simply ricochet, deflecting harmlessly off the sloped plates with a shower of sparks, a defiant whisper against the monstrous advance. It was as if they were firing pebbles, utterly useless against this new, formidable enemy. Panic, a cold, creeping tendril, would begin to wrap around their resolve. Their door knocker, once their pride, was now a useless toy. The green monster, as some would soon call it, continued its inexorable crawl forward, its wide tracks churning up the earth, its diesel engine emitting a deep, resonant growl that vibrated through the very ground beneath their feet. It wasn't just a tank. It was an apparition, a phantom draped in steel, seemingly impervious to their most potent weapons. I imagine the growing sense of dread, the frantic shouts for heavier artillery, for something, anything, that could halt this unstoppable force. But for now, there was nothing. The T-34, for that was its name, would roll onward, its tracks slowly, deliberately, crushing the very gun that had just fired upon it, grinding it into twisted scrap metal beneath its immense weight. The crew, if they were lucky, would scatter, their faces etched with a fear they hadn't known before, a fear of the unknown. For the first time, these seasoned Wehrmacht soldiers, conquerors of the West, faced a tank unlike anything they had ever conceived, a true steel phantom, a harbinger of a new and terrifying chapter in the war. The shock of that first encounter, the sheer disbelief in the face of what their weapons couldn't do, would echo through the German lines, sending shivers down the spines of commanders and common soldiers alike. It was a stark, brutal awakening to the fact that the war in the East would be profoundly different from anything that had come before. To truly understand the genesis of this formidable machine, the T-34, we must gently pull back the curtain of time, moving away from the summer of 1941 and stepping into the dusty, sun-baked landscapes of the Spanish Civil War. A conflict that simmered with ideological fervor between 1936 and 1939. I find it fascinating how often seemingly distant conflicts serve as the proving grounds, the grim laboratories, for the technologies and doctrines that will define future, larger struggles. The Soviets, aligning themselves with the Republican cause, deployed their early tank models to Spain, the T-26 and the BT-5. These were, by the standards of the mid-1930s, quite respectable machines. The T-26, a light infantry tank, boasted a 45mm gun, capable of dishing out a decent punch against the thinly armored vehicles of the time. The BT-5, a swift cavalry tank, was renowned for its speed and its ability to switch between tracks and wheels for road travel, a truly innovative feature for its era. In the initial engagements, these Soviet tanks, a relatively modern force, indeed proved their worth. I can envision the early reports filtering back to Moscow, filled with praise for their firepower and mobility. They were, in many instances, superior to the light and often underarmed vehicles fielded by the fascist forces of Italy and Germany. The Italian CV-35 tankettes, essentially mobile machine gun carriers, and Germany's Panzer I, armed only with machine guns, were often no match for the Soviet 45mm cannon. The T-26 and BT-5 could quite literally dance around and through enemy lines, their shells finding purchase against the thin armor of their adversaries. There would have been a palpable sense of triumph, a reinforcement of the Soviet belief in their nascent armored doctrines. However, as the conflict wore on, and the Germans, supporting Franco's nationalists, gained more experience and refined their tactics, the tide began to turn. The early praise for Soviet tanks started to be tempered by increasingly grim realities. I imagine the shift in the tone of the dispatches, from confident boasts to somber warnings. The German Pak-36, that very same 37mm anti-tank gun that would later prove so utterly useless against the T-34, began to cut down the T-26s and BT-5s with alarming efficiency. The T-26, with its armor ranging from just 6 to 16mm, barely half an inch at its thickest points, and the BT-5, similarly protected, were simply not designed to withstand concentrated anti-tank fire. A direct hit from a Pak-36, even with its relatively small caliber, often meant a penetration, a devastating explosion within the cramped confines of the tank, or, at the very least, a catastrophic mobility kill. The message that emerged from the dusty battlefields of Spain, etched in the twisted steel of disabled Soviet tanks and the grim statistics of their losses, was unequivocally clear. It echoed through the Soviet High Command, a stark and undeniable truth. The Red Army, if it was to face the coming storm of modern warfare, needed something tougher. It needed a new breed of tank, one with significantly thicker armor, capable of shrugging off the kinds of hits that were now felling their current fleet. And crucially, it needed heavier guns, cannons that could not only penetrate enemy armor, but deliver a decisive, overwhelming blow. The Spanish Civil War, for all its localized brutality, became an invaluable, albeit tragic, classroom, teaching the Soviets that the future of tank warfare demanded a radical leap forward, a shift towards machines that prioritized protection and concentrated firepower. This realization, a quiet, almost whispered imperative born from the chaos of war, would plant the seeds for the legend that was to come. As a scholar of history, I often reflect on how adversity, sometimes even humiliation, can be the most potent catalyst for innovation. For the Soviet Union, the period just before the Great Patriotic War was rife with such painful awakenings, revealing profound weaknesses in their military doctrine and equipment, particularly concerning their tanks. I delve into these moments not to dwell on failure, but to understand the incredible pressure and learning that led to ultimate triumph. Two specific conflicts stand out as stark: bloody lessons the Winter War against Finland and the clashes at Khalkhin Gol against Japan. Let us first turn our attention to the unforgiving, snow-swept landscapes of Finland during the Winter War of 1939 to 1940. I imagine the vast, silent forests, broken only by the crunch of boots on snow and the distant, chilling crack of sniper fire. The Soviet invasion, intended as a swift, decisive campaign, quickly bogged down into a grueling, brutal struggle against a highly motivated and fiercely resilient Finnish defense. Here, every weakness of the existing Soviet tank designs was exposed with a terrible clarity. The T-26s and BT-5s, which had enjoyed some initial success in Spain, found themselves utterly outmatched by the extreme conditions and the ingenious tactics of the Finnish forces. Their thin armor, already proven vulnerable to German anti-tank guns, was now easily pierced by Finnish anti-tank rifles and even Molotov cocktails, improvised incendiary devices that would often ignite the gasoline engines of the Soviet tanks. I can almost smell the acrid smoke of burning fuel, the screams of trapped crews, as these gasoline tanks became fiery death traps in the frozen wilderness. The underpowered guns, while adequate against early German tanks, struggled against fortified Finnish positions and were often incapable of providing effective support for the infantry slogging through the deep snow. The sight of a Soviet tank, stuck in a snowdrift, its thin armor easily penetrated, its gasoline engine ablaze, must have been a haunting one, a stark symbol of strategic and technological miscalculation. Simultaneously, on the far eastern reaches of the Soviet Empire, another, equally brutal education was underway. In the summer of 1939, along the remote border with Japanese-occupied Manchuria, a series of undeclared battles erupted at Khalkhin Gol. Here, the flat, arid steppes presented a different challenge. But the results for Soviet tanks were disturbingly similar. against the determined and often fanatical Japanese forces. The Soviet BT series tanks once again proved to be fragile and unreliable. While the Japanese tanks themselves were not technologically superior, their anti-tank tactics and the sheer ferocity of their attacks highlighted the vulnerabilities of the Soviet designs. The BTs, designed for speed, often lacked the robust construction needed for sustained combat, suffering frequent mechanical breakdowns in the harsh terrain. Their armor, still too thin, was vulnerable to Japanese anti-tank weapons, leading to significant losses. I reflect on the irony that in both the frozen North and the dusty East, the same painful lessons were being hammered home. Soviet tanks were not durable enough, not survivable enough, and often not powerful enough to stand up to the demands of modern, intense conflict. These bloody lessons, etched into the collective memory of the Red Army and meticulously analyzed by Soviet engineers, were not in vain. They served as a powerful, undeniable indictment of existing designs and a clarion call for radical change. The engineers, burdened by these heavy truths and driven by the urgent needs of national defense, became convinced. They understood, with a profound certainty that only true battlefield experience can impart, that an entirely new tank design was not merely desirable, but absolutely essential. It was clear that incremental improvements would no longer suffice. What was needed was a complete reimagining, a revolutionary leap forward in armored technology. The stage was set, however tragically, for the birth of a legend. The quiet, almost sacred spaces of the Design Bureau, far from the roar of battle, are where the seeds of military legends are often sown. Following the stark lessons from Spain, Finland, and Khalkhin Gol, the Soviet tank engineers were seized by an urgent, almost desperate mission to create a tank that could withstand the onslaught of a modern war. I often find myself contemplating the intense intellectual and emotional pressure these individuals must have faced, knowing that the very survival of their nation could hinge on their blueprints. This chapter in the T-34's story is particularly poignant, marked by both brilliant innovation and profound personal sacrifice. The journey began with intense experimentation. I envisioned the bustling design offices, filled with the scent of drafting paper and hot tea, late into the night. One of the most intriguing prototypes that emerged from this period was the A-20. This tank was designed with a complex convertible wheel and track system, a continuation of the BT series' innovative, yet somewhat over-engineered, approach. The idea was to combine the speed of wheeled travel on roads with the cross-country capability of tracks. However, the engineers, guided by the harsh realities of combat, began to question whether such a complicated system was truly necessary or simply added unwanted weight and mechanical fragility. My thoughts wandered to the discussions they must have had, weighing the theoretical advantages against the practicalities of mass production and battlefield reliability. From these deliberations, a new vision began to crystallize: simplicity, robust protection, and powerful armament. This led to the development of the A-32, a more radical departure from previous designs. I picture the initial sketches, the painstaking calculations, as they envisioned a heavier machine, one that emphasized survivability. This prototype boasted an impressive 30 millimeters, just over an inch of sloped armor, a significant upgrade from its predecessors. This sloping, a design feature that would become iconic, was revolutionary, effectively increasing the armor's thickness against incoming shells without adding proportional weight. Crucially, the A-32 was armed with a formidable 76.2 millimeter gun, a weapon capable of delivering a truly devastating blow to any known contemporary tank. In 1939, these prototypes underwent rigorous state trials. I can almost hear the rumble of engines, the churn of tracks, as these new machines were put through their paces in simulated combat conditions. Their performance scrutinized by high-ranking Soviet leaders and military experts. The trials were undeniably impressive. The A-32 in particular demonstrated a potent blend of firepower, protection, and mobility that hinted at its future potential. Yet, the demanding Soviet leadership, acutely aware of the escalating global tensions, pushed for even more. They demanded further improvements, a relentless pursuit of perfection in the face of an uncertain future. At the heart of this relentless drive was the chief designer, Mikhail Koshkin. He was a man driven by an almost singular vision, a profound belief in his design. To truly prove the A-32's, which by now was evolving into the T-34, durability and reliability. Koshkin undertook an extraordinary, almost mythic journey. In the bitter cold of early 1940, he personally led a clandestine, epic road trip. He drove a prototype, not just around a test track, but on an arduous 750-kilometer, approximately 465-mile journey from the Kharkov tank factory to Moscow, the very heart of Soviet power. I imagine the biting winds, the frozen landscape, the constant mechanical challenges, and the sheer physical and mental strain of such an undertaking. It was a testament to his conviction, a desperate plea to the authorities to understand the true strength of his creation. This heroic, yet tragic, journey proved the tank's worth beyond a shadow of a doubt, demonstrating its ruggedness and operational readiness in the most unforgiving conditions. However, the immense stress, the exposure to the elements, and the relentless demands of his work took a heavy toll on Koshkin's health. He contracted pneumonia and, tragically, succumbed to the illness shortly after, sacrificing his life for the tank he had so passionately championed. His sacrifice was not in vain. By March 1940, Stalin, recognizing the critical importance of Koshkin's vision and the irrefutable evidence of the trials, approved the mass production of the T-34. The decision was made, the blueprints finalized, and the factories began to hum with the immense task of bringing this steel legend to life. A truly formidable and revolutionary war machine was about to enter the world stage. Born from the quiet determination of engineers and the ultimate sacrifice of its visionary creator. The date, June 22, 1941, remains etched in the annals of history as a day of profound and devastating consequence. On that crisp, early summer morning, under the pale light of dawn, Operation Barbarossa began. The German invasion of the Soviet Union. A vast and terrifying onslaught unleashed a torrent of fire and steel across the expansive Eastern Front. I often reflect on the sheer scale of that moment, the almost unfathomable clash of two ideological giants. The Red Army, though possessing a staggering numerical advantage of over 20,000 tanks, was, in many ways, an army caught between two eras. The vast majority of these tanks were the older models, the T-26s, BT-5s, and BT-7s. The very machines whose weaknesses had been so painfully exposed in the earlier conflicts I've spoken about. They were valiant, certainly, but largely outdated for the kind of blitzkrieg warfare the Germans had perfected. Then, amidst this sea of older, vulnerable machines, a new silhouette emerged from the swirling dust and smoke. When the T-34 made its initial appearances on the battlefield, the effect on the German panzer crews was nothing short of electrifying. I imagine the scene I spoke of earlier, repeated across countless skirmishes, German tank gunners, having grown accustomed to the satisfying thud and penetration of their shells into enemy armor, now watched in stunned silence as their rounds, fired from their Panzer III's 37mm or even early Panzer IV's 75mm guns, simply ricocheted off the T-34's sloped hull. The sound would have been a sickening clank or a high-pitched zing as the shells were deflected, rendered harmless. This was an experience that shattered their confidence, a stark, visceral demonstration that their perceived technological superiority was, in this crucial aspect, utterly negated. The T-34 was, for all intents and purposes, a ghost, a phantom that their conventional weapons could not reliably touch. It quickly became clear that only the dreaded German 88mm anti-aircraft gun, repurposed with deadly effect as an anti-tank weapon, could reliably destroy the T-34 from a distance. Its high-velocity, heavy shell was one of the few things that could punch through that revolutionary sloped armor. However, the story of the T-34's initial impact is not simply one of technological marvel. It is a complex narrative, interwoven with the deep-seated organizational and strategic weaknesses of the Red Army at the outset of the war. While the T-34 was indeed a revolutionary machine, the crews assigned to operate them were often poorly trained, sometimes with only a few hours of instruction before being thrown into the inferno of battle. I can almost hear the frantic shouts within the cramped turrets, the fumbling with unfamiliar controls, the desperate attempts to coordinate in the chaos. Compounding this, the logistics of the Red Army, stretched thin and often poorly organized, began to collapse under the relentless German advance. Fuel and ammunition supplies, spare parts, and essential maintenance support often failed to reach the front lines. A tank, no matter how advanced, is useless without fuel to move, shells to fire, or the ability to stay operational. Moreover, the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, reigned supreme in the skies during those early months. Without adequate air cover, Soviet tank columns, even those comprised of T-34s, were vulnerable to devastating aerial attacks, strafing runs, and dive bombing. I envisioned the terror of a tank crew as Stukas shrieked down from above, their sirens howling, dropping bombs that could cripple or destroy even the toughest tank. Consequently, despite the T-34's formidable design, many were lost not to direct enemy fire, but to a myriad of other factors. Thousands were abandoned due to mechanical breakdowns, simply running out of fuel, or getting stuck in the mud as the Red Army conducted its desperate, sprawling retreats. The sight of a perfectly capable T-34 left behind on a roadside, its engine silent, its gun still, must have been a heartbreaking testament to the brutal realities of those early days. The T-34 had arrived, a harbinger of a new era. But the Red Army itself was still reeling, struggling to harness the power of this remarkable weapon. Its true potential, though glimpsed, was yet to be fully realized. As the calendar pages turned from the fiery summer of 1941 to the chilling embrace of autumn, the Eastern Front transformed, not just by the changing leaves, but by an even more formidable force, the Russian climate. I find this aspect of the war deeply compelling. How the very land itself became a player in the grand, brutal game. The infamous Rasputitsa, the season of mud, descended upon the vast plains. Roads that had been passable, however rough, during the dry summer, now dissolved into endless seas of viscous, clinging mud. I can almost feel the heavy, sucking embrace of the earth, pulling at boots, swallowing vehicles whole. German panzer divisions, their tanks designed for the hard-packed roads and relatively firm terrains of Western Europe, found themselves mired. Their narrower tracks, while efficient on paved surfaces, were a distinct liability in the deep, clinging mire. I imagine the frustration, the physical exhaustion of German crews attempting to extricate their heavy machines, often sinking deeper with every turn of the tracks. Their formidable blitzkrieg, which relied on speed and decisive maneuver, was now bogged down, quite literally, in the unforgiving landscape. But for the T-34, this environmental catastrophe became an unexpected advantage, a testament to its inherent suitability for the vast, often trackless, expanses of the Soviet Union, its wide tracks, a design feature that might have seemed merely robust, now proved to be its salvation. These broad treads distributed the tank's weight more effectively over a larger surface area, allowing the T-34 to keep moving, albeit slowly, through the quagmire that swallowed its German counterparts. I envision these green monsters, churning through the mud, their engines straining, but still advancing, a symbol of grim resilience amidst the pervasive despair. While German tanks lay helpless, immobile targets for Soviet artillery and infantry, the T-34 continued to operate, giving the Red Army a crucial, albeit often local, tactical edge. Beyond the power of the land, this period also saw the emergence of vital tactical innovations, born from the crucible of necessity. One figure who stands out in my mind is Colonel Mikhail Katakov. He was a commander who understood that simply possessing superior hardware was not enough. It had to be wielded with cunning and precision. Faced with the overwhelming technological superiority of the German 88mm guns and the increasing prevalence of advanced German anti-tank defenses, Katakov introduced new, highly effective tactics. I picture his headquarters, perhaps a dimly lit dugout, as he meticulously planned and refined these strategies, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of his T-34s with an intimate knowledge. His approach was marked by a shift towards ambush tactics. Instead of frontal assaults, which had proven suicidal against well-prepared German lines, Katakov's units would hide their T-34s, expertly camouflaging them within the terrain, the edge of a forest, a rise in the land, a cluster of dilapidated buildings. They would wait, patiently, silently, allowing enemy tanks to close the distance, lulling them into a false sense of security. I imagine the crews inside the T-34s, listening to the approaching rumble of German engines, their hearts pounding, their hands steady on their controls, waiting for the precise moment. Katakov understood the crucial weakness of his tank's gun against heavily armored targets at long range, and the vulnerability of the German tanks at close quarters. He instructed his crews to hold their fire, to wait until enemy tanks closed to within a mere 300 meters, roughly 1,000 feet before striking. At this range, the T-34's 76 2mm gun had a far greater chance of penetrating the German armor, particularly their thinner side and rear plating. These patient, lethal ambushes, combined with the T-34's superior mobility in the mud, marked the first significant shift in Soviet armored doctrine. It was no longer about direct, brute force engagements, but about intelligent application of force, about leveraging the T-34's strengths, its armor, its gun, its wide tracks, in combination with cunning and surprise. These lessons were not merely theoretical. They were learned in blood and mud, proving the T-34's true battlefield potential. It was a period of grim adaptation, where the machine and the men who operated it began to truly understand each other, forging a new, more effective way of waging war. The name Stalingrad echoes with a particular, chilling resonance in the annals of World War II. It was a city that became synonymous with unimaginable brutality, a testament to human endurance, and a turning point that carved itself deep into the memory of the conflict. For the T-34 Stalingrad was not just a battleground. It was a forge. A place where the tank became more than just a weapon. It transformed into a potent symbol of Soviet industrial resilience, a stark manifestation of desperation, and a testament to the unyielding will of a nation. I often reflect on the images of Stalingrad, a city reduced to rubble and ash, yet pulsing with a ferocious, indomitable spirit. I imagine the landscape of Stalingrad in late 1942, a moonscape of shattered buildings, twisted metal, and the pervasive scent of dust and cordite. Amidst this infernal panorama, one of the most remarkable stories of wartime production unfolded. In the beleaguered city, the famous Stalingrad tractor plant, converted entirely to tank production, continued to churn out T-34s even as the battle raged in the very streets outside its walls. I picture the workers, men and women, often elderly or mere teenagers, laboring around the clock, their faces grimed with grease and sweat, illuminated by the harsh industrial lights, the rhythmic clang of metal, the hiss of welding torches, the roar of engines. These were the sounds of defiance, a counterpoint to the relentless German artillery barrage. The factory floor itself was not far from the front lines. Sometimes, the roar of battle was not a distant echo, but an immediate, terrifying reality. I can almost feel the vibrations of distant explosions, the rattle of machine gun fire, seeping into the very structure of the factory. Shells would fall nearby, sending shock waves through the air, perhaps even rattling the assembly lines. Yet, the work continued. There was no pause, no surrender to fear. As each T-34 rolled off the assembly line, still gleaming with fresh paint, it wasn't driven to a distant training ground or a supply depot. No, these tanks rolled straight from the assembly lines, often with only minimal testing, directly into the maelstrom of battle. I envision a newly minted tank, its diesel engine coughing to life, perhaps with its first batch of ammunition being loaded right there in the factory yard. Its crew, likely exhausted, hardened men, would clamber aboard, and within minutes, the tank would be rumbling out through the factory gates, straight into the ruins of Stalingrad, firing its first shells. Not in practice, but in desperate, mortal combat. This was a profound act of industrial courage and national will. The sight of a T-34, seemingly born from the very dust and despair of the city, emerging to join the fight, must have been an incredible boost to the morale of the defenders. It was a tangible sign that the Soviet Union would not break, that its industrial heart still beat, however fiercely under siege. The tank became not just a piece of military hardware, but a powerful, visceral symbol. It represented the unyielding resolve of the Soviet people, their desperate fight for survival, and their astonishing capacity for resilience in the face of annihilation. For those who fought in Stalingrad, and for the nation as a whole, the T-34 was more than steel and engine. It was hope. It was defiance. It was the very embodiment of a refusal to yield. Its production, under such impossible conditions, is a testament to a spirit that refused to be crushed, a quiet, industrial miracle performed in the shadow of relentless bombardment. The ebb and flow of technological warfare are often dictated by a relentless cycle of innovation and counter-innovation. By 1942 and early 1943, the initial shock and awe inspired by the T-34 had begun to wane. The German military, tenacious and ingenious in its own right, had absorbed the lessons of those first brutal encounters and responded with a new generation of more potent weapons. I often reflect on this period as a crucial turning point. A time when the T-34, once the undisputed king of the Eastern Front, had to adapt or risk being relegated to obsolescence. The battlefield, ever a harsh tutor, was demanding evolution. I imagine the German design bureaus, fueled by reports of the T-34's invulnerability, working feverishly to close the gap. Their answer came in several forms. First, the venerable Panzer IV, initially designed as an infantry support tank, underwent significant upgrades. The Panzer IV F2 variant, unleashed by 1942, was armed with a much longer-barreled 75mm gun. This cannon, with its higher muzzle velocity, could now reliably penetrate the T-34's frontal armor from a considerable distance. Suddenly, the tables were turning. What had once been a near-invincible shield was now vulnerable. Then came the Stuggy 3s, Sturmgeschütz assault guns, highly effective tank destroyers built on the Panzer III chassis. With their powerful, low-profile guns, they presented a deadly threat, often lying in ambush. And not long after, the Martyr series of tank destroyers, open-topped but boasting even more powerful anti-tank guns, began to stalk Soviet armor. But the true game-changer, the ultimate response from the Germans, arrived in the form of the Tiger I. This new heavy tank, with its thick, boxy armor and its terrifying 88mm gun, was a truly fearsome beast. I can almost hear the rumble of its powerful engine, see its imposing silhouette emerging from the mists, radiating an aura of invincibility. A single Tiger could hold off an entire company of T-34s, its gun capable of destroying Soviet tanks from over a mile away, while the T-34's 76.2mm shells simply bounced off its thick frontal armor, even at closer ranges. The T-34, which had once dominated the battlefield with its technological superiority, could no longer do so by itself. The era of unchallenged supremacy was over. The Soviet engineers, once again, were faced with a critical imperative to innovate. They responded with a series of crucial upgrades, transforming the T-34 to keep pace with the rapidly escalating arms race. I picture the intense discussions, the tireless work to integrate new solutions without compromising the tank's fundamental strengths, its simplicity, its production ease, and its robust design. One of the most visually distinctive upgrades was the introduction of the iconic hexagonal turret, often affectionately nicknamed the Mickey Mouse turret due to its shape. This new turret was easier to manufacture, had thicker armor, and often provided more space for the crew and for mounting an improved gun. Other practical improvements were also implemented. External fuel drums were added, extending the tank's operational range, a vital consideration for the vast distances of the Eastern Front. Handrails were welded onto the hull, a simple yet critical addition that allowed infantry riders to cling to the tank's exterior, facilitating combined arms assaults. Of course, the armor itself was incrementally thickened in critical areas, sometimes by welding on additional plates or through improved manufacturing processes. These modifications were not just about enhancing the tank. They were about adapting to a new, more lethal battlefield environment. The T-34, through this continuous process of evolution and adaptation, ensured its relevance. It learned to live and fight among the new beasts of the German arsenal. ready to face the titanic struggles that lay ahead. Summer of 1943. The air across the Kursk salient, a vast bulge in the Soviet lines, was thick with an almost unbearable tension. It was here, on these sprawling, undulating plains of southern Russia, that the largest tank battle in history was about to unfold. I always returned to Kursk with a sense of awe and quiet solemnity, for it was a clash of titans, a truly monumental engagement that would decide the fate of the Eastern Front. Thousands upon thousands of tanks, German and Soviet, rumbled towards each other, poised for an apocalyptic confrontation. For the T-34, Kursk was not merely a battle. It was the ultimate test. The crucible where its strengths and weaknesses would be laid bare against the very best of Germany's new armored might. I imagined the immense scale, the endless lines of Soviet T-34s, T-70s, and Su-152s facing off against the formidable German panzers, the battle-hardened Panzer IVs, the sleek new Panther tanks, and the terrifying, heavily armored Tigers. The German offensive, Operation Citadel, was designed to pinch off the Kursk salient, destroy vast numbers of Soviet forces, and regain the strategic initiative. They brought with them their most advanced and powerful tanks, hoping to crush the Soviet defenses with superior firepower and armor. In the ensuing maelstrom, the T-34 fought with its characteristic ferocity. Its strengths, particularly its mobility and sheer numbers, were undeniable. Soviet tank crews, now more experienced and employing refined tactics, maneuvered their T-34s with skill, often using the terrain to their advantage, attempting to flank the slower, heavier German tanks. I picture the chaos of the Prokhorovka battlefield, one of the most intense engagements within Kursk, where T-34s swarmed German Tigers and Panthers in desperate, close-quarters combat, trying to get to their vulnerable sides and rear armor. The T-34's reliability and ease of repair, coupled with the Soviet Union's astonishing capacity for mass production, meant that for every German tank disabled, several more T-34s were often ready to take its place. This numerical superiority, this relentless flood of green steel, became a decisive factor. However, Kursk also starkly revealed the T-34's vulnerabilities against the new generation of German heavy tanks, while the earlier 76.2mm gun was still potent. It was often outmatched by the long-barreled 75mm gun of the Panther and, especially, the fearsome 88mm gun of the Tiger. From long ranges, a Panther or a Tiger could reliably destroy a T-34, while the T-34's shells often bounced harmlessly off the frontal armor of these German giants. I imagine the frustration and desperation of T-34 crews, knowing they had to close to dangerously short distances, often exposing themselves to devastating fire, just to have a chance at a kill. Yet, despite being outgunned by the new German heavies, the T-34 in overwhelming numbers prevailed. Kursk proved to be the decisive moment, the strategic high-water mark for the German army in the East. Their last great offensive in the Soviet Union was broken, shattered against the steel wall of T-34s and the tenacious defense of the Red Army. Following Kursk, the initiative irrevocably shifted. The Soviet counteroffensive began, a relentless westward drive that would not stop until the red banner flew over Berlin. The T-34, though scarred and battered, had played a pivotal role, proving that a balance of good design, mass production, and courageous crews could overcome even the most formidable individual weapons. It was a victory forged in the fires of attrition, a testament to the enduring power of numbers and the will to fight. As our journey through the story of the T-34 gently draws to a close, I find myself reflecting on its profound and multifaceted legacy. This was not merely a machine, it was a phenomenon, a testament to a nation's ingenuity under duress, and a symbol that resonated deeply through the conflict and beyond. To truly appreciate its enduring significance, we must consider the remarkable balance it achieved, a synthesis of qualities that defined the next generation of armored warfare. The T-34's design was, at its core, revolutionary. Its sloped armor, a feature I have often highlighted, was a stroke of genius, offering superior protection against enemy shells by increasing the effective thickness of the steel without adding prohibitive weight. This was a concept that would influence tank design for decades to come. Paired with this innovative protection was its powerful 76.2mm gun, which, for the early stages of the war, provided a devastating punch against any contemporary German tank. Later, as we've discussed, this was upgraded to an even more potent 85mm gun in the T-34-85 variant, ensuring its continued relevance against Germany's newer, heavier tanks. And powering this formidable combination was a rugged diesel engine, which not only offered good fuel economy, but was also less prone to igniting when hit compared to gasoline engines. A vital lesson learned from the painful experiences of earlier Soviet tanks. This trifecta of firepower, protection, and mobility struck a perfect balance, setting a new standard for main battle tank design. Compared to the German Panzers I-4, which, while effective in their own right, evolved more incrementally, the T-34 represented a genuine leap into the future of tank design. It wasn't just an improvement, it was a conceptual shift, a bold embrace of what modern armored warfare truly demanded. Its appearance sent shockwaves through the German high command, forcing them to reevaluate their own designs and accelerate their development of new, heavier tanks. The T-34 literally forced its adversaries to innovate, a powerful testament to its groundbreaking impact. Of course, no machine is without its flaws, and the T-34 was no exception. I often think of the cramped interiors, particularly in the earlier models, which made operating the tank a physically demanding and uncomfortable experience for its crews. Visibility was often poor, restricted by small vision ports and an initial lack of proper commanders' cupolas, which put Soviet tank commanders at a tactical disadvantage. And while its design was robust, uneven production quality, particularly during the desperate early years of the war when factories were relocated and skilled labor was scarce, meant that some T-34s rolled off the line with mechanical issues. However, these flaws, while significant, were ultimately overshadowed by its undeniable strengths and, crucially, by the sheer numbers in which it could be produced. Its simplicity of design meant it could be manufactured quickly and in vast quantities, and its ruggedness meant it could often be repaired in the field. This combination of mass production and operational reliability made it an unstoppable force, a relentless tide of green steel that the Germans simply could not stem. More than just a machine, the T-34 became the steel backbone of the Red Army. It was the tank that carried the Soviets from the defensive lines around Moscow, through the vast, bloody expanse of the Eastern Front, all the way to the shattered streets of Berlin. It was a symbol of national defiance, of industrial might, and of the unwavering determination of the Soviet people. Its rumble, once a sound of terror for the Germans, became a sound of hope for the Soviets. As I gently close this chapter of our shared historical journey, I find myself reflecting on its enduring presence, not just in military history, but in the collective memory of a world forever changed by its presence. And perhaps, as the night deepens, we can still hear the distant, phantom rumble of its tracks, carrying its legacy quietly into history.